right, everyone. Welcome. It's Thursday Night Live, and we are so excited to have a special guest with us tonight, the one and only Kat Reinhert, all the way from New York City. So,
hey.
Welcome. I wish we had an applause track, but I don't. But I'm super pumped to have you on tonight. If you don't already know who Kat is a singer-songwriter, now based in New York City, an educator, an author, and president of the Association for Popular Music Education. And so I've reached out to Kat recently. We were talking all about developing, new degree programs in popular music ed. I had just fascinating conversations, been reading through her dissertation, and I thought more of the world needs to know about Kat. And so I am excited to be here tonight with her to answer some questions. If you're tuning in live and watching, we'll take your questions as well. You can always feel free to kick things over there into the chat. We'll keep an eye on that. And without further ado, welcome.
Thanks. That's like the coolest intro music ever. I don't know if everybody else heard that, but it's like jamming. And I'm like, this is amazing. Yeah. I want to do that. I just want to go again. Like to the intro. I'm like, can we just have a dance party?
Yeah, we might need to up our gaming.
That's at the end.
A mixer over here and start like mixing in sounds throughout.
Totally.
So, talk to us here, because there's so many different terms that get thrown around of how we describe music that's not classical music. And this is one of these terms. So can you talk to us a little bit about what is popular music education?
Yeah, so popular music education is the term that the music education kind of conglomerate uses to describe music that is not musical theater, jazz, or classical. That's the term that they adopted. I didn't adopt it. It was like, so popular music education has been like outside of this country, it's been in the UK and Australia for over 25 plus years. And there's research going back that far on best practices, pedagogies. Kind of started like to get a lot of traction with Lucy Green, who wrote a book, How Popular Musicians Learn. And then it got adopted. So it's the term that gets used most by music in the music education circles. In the voice circles, they tend to use contemporary commercial music, but that one also encompasses musical theater and jazz, which popular music, when they're talking about it in music education circles, does not. And I think that's an important distinction about like how these things kind of like circulate and work. And then in addition, you have programs that are like popular music, but they call them commercial or contemporary. So you have the contemporary music program, for example, at the University of Miami, which is all popular music. It's not really musical theater or jazz, because there's a musical theater program, there's a jazz program, there's a classical program, and then there's a contemporary program. Chris Sampson at USC also calls them contemporary musicians because they're of the now. And so that's kind of, I don't know. I always think of it as like one side of a penny versus another. It still is like, just as long as you define what you're talking about. So if I'm talking about it, I'm always defining what I mean by it. Like when I say popular music, I'm talking about everything that is not musical theater, jazz, or classical music. So I include folk, rap, hip hop, pop, like anything that would be kind of in that realm is in that for me. And that is a lot of the research stuff that I learned, is like how you define a term, just define it and then move on and tell people how you're talking about it. And then we're cool. So I think it can get confusing, but generally if you see any of those terms, contemporary, commercial, or popular, in some sort of school setting, they're referring to music that's not in these other places, because they already have traditions, I think, to teaching them, to the music, there's so many, they're long lived, and popular music in education is shorter.
Yeah. I think the other thing is too, is if I recall, a lot of it was trying to come up with a name for what it was instead of calling it what it wasn't.
Yeah, exactly.
For the longest time they were calling it non-classical music, but you wouldn't say a cat's a non-dog.
Right, exactly. And I think the CCM term is really useful in that sense, especially in the voice thing, where it's a larger umbrella that they're talking about, because the sounds that are made in musical theater and jazz are similar to the sounds that the voice makes in these popular music. So that it totally makes sense. But the way that popular music gets taught is different than how jazz gets taught, which is different than how musical theater gets taught. So absolutely. I think that educational component kind of shifts it a little bit. Because the pedagogy and the approaches are sometimes different, although they don't need to be, but they tend to be.
They tend to be. Good point. So tell me, so you're, as I mentioned at the top, you're the president of a group called the Association for Popular Music Education. And I got to go to one of the conferences several years back when the conference was held up at Berkeley. I had an amazing time, learned lots of stuff. But, tell everyone about it, what they are and what they do.
Yeah. Well, the org is it 8 years now? With COVID, I'm get all messed. It's like 8 or 9 years old. So it's a fairly young organization. And it started with a bunch of people who were running popular music or contemporary like performance programs at colleges and wanted to kind of share best practices and get together. So it started just like in a hotel room where like Berkeley, USC, I think the Center for Contemporary Music in Nashville, like these people who were working in there just kind of got together and were like, what are you doing? And then it turned into a conference and an org. And so it's a nonprofit organization whose mission is to promote popular music education at all levels and beyond. So grabbing from the industry, from performance-minded programs, as well as popular music at the K through 12 level, where the idea is to add that into more curriculums and to promote the learning of the music that the students are most familiar with as a way to engage them in music learning, in addition to all the other genres that you might have them learn. And the biggest goal, especially at the K through 12 level, is actually to create lifelong learners and lifelong curators of music. So, you have a banker who played guitar in his rock ensemble in high school. He goes into banking, but every night when he comes home, he's able to take out his guitar and like jam along to his favorite songs. And it's a stress relief and it's fun for him. And like, he maybe like gets together with his friends and like jams out, but it's the idea that we're creating lifelong music makers and not necessarily musicians. I think people often get confused. They're like, oh, pop music, you're just going to be like the superstar, like, talent, American Idol. And it's like, no. It's not what it's about. Like some people will go do that, just like some people will learn violin in school and then go be like on Carnegie Hall stage, playing the violin. But that's not the majority of people. So many people play instruments in middle school, high school, and then they never pick them up again because there's no way to engage unless you're in an ensemble. And so this kind of thing is helping students learn how to be engaged with music kind of on their own dime and their own time, I would say.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's one of the things that bother me. I went to college as a vocal performance major, which was classical music. And, I've talked with colleagues a lot. There is no community opera. So like if you go to college to become an opera singer and you don't pursue it professionally, there's not really anything for you to do.
Right. And so
it's really sad that you can spend 4 years on a degree and have no operatic opportunities after you leave that degree.
Totally. And I think that's kind of like, so APME is this really, it's an org that has all these different people. I mean, we have people from UK, from Australia, from around the world, the United States, and it's higher education professors, but it's also K through 12 teachers, and there are performers and there are industry people. And, we have special guests that come in and talk or perform. And it's just a really good meeting of minds so that when everybody comes together for the annual conference, there's a community. Like we get a lot of people, and it's our hashtag, which is like, I found my people. Like people like come and they're like, oh my God, I'm not alone in the world trying to do this thing. And like they get names. And so we're trying to set up a larger community as we're going. And that's one of my things as president that I'm really trying to do is engage our community more. And we've been hosting monthly like happy hour hangs, like virtually. And that's been really fun. We're going to do like a costume party one in October, and it's just a whole bunch of us from all over the world on Zoom, just kind of like shooting the breeze and talking and like, hey, what are you up to? And, making fun of Brian's mustache because our executive director grew like one of those kind of mustaches over COVID. And so we were just, ratting on him. I mean, it's just like a hang, like you would at a bar. But yeah, our conference is actually going to be the ones this year got canceled, but next year we're going to be in Chicago. So yeah, that's really exciting. At Columbia College, they're hosting us, and the call for participation is out and live on our website. So if you have something you want to talk about, or it doesn't have to be heavy research. Like, you can bring in a best practice and like share with that. We love that kind of stuff. So it can be heavy research too, which is, I think, the cool part is you get all of it. You get the heavy philosophical pedagogy stuff, and then you get the kind of practical stuff, like side by side in a room together talking. And that's kind of rare in conference land. So, and it's fun. Like, yeah. Everybody just
anytime somebody says conference Chicago and I can get my Giordano's pizza and do the run, I'm in. So
Portillo's hot dog, yeah, for sure.
Right. So I think I'm gonna have to get on that website.
Yeah.
I didn't realize they were taking
until November 1st, and the conference is June. I'm gonna mess up the date. It's early June. I didn't memorize the dates, so
yeah. But I mean, it's I had a blast when I was there, and like when I was there, I was at Berkeley, and I got to hear the student bands at Berkeley, which was incredible.
Yep.
I just felt like it was such an opening group of and welcoming group of educators, and you felt right at home as soon as you got there, which was awesome.
Yeah, for anybody who's working in popular music, it's one of those places where you come and it's like, so what are you doing? There's never a question of like, should you be doing this, or like, what, it's always like, so what are you working on? Like, what are you into? Like, what's your thing? And I don't know, last year in New York, we had like beatboxers that were like, I mean, it was cool. We had Michael League from Snarky Puppy give a keynote. We had beatboxers. We had a drummer who like had no hands who was drumming. I mean, there's like, it's great. So
that's amazing. Now, one of the things was, I think the first time I had heard this idea, and I've heard it from other people, who are part of APME, is this idea of decolonizing the music room. So can you talk to us a little bit about what this means? Because I think there's some misunderstanding. And I also think it's something we all need to be thinking about deeply and putting into action.
Yeah, especially these days with all of the social stuff that's going on especially in our country and around the world. But essentially, it means being very inclusive of everything. And so you're not talking just about dead white composers, and those are the higher echelon of music, and that is like the only thing that is amazing. It's talking about them. At the same time, you're talking about Miles Davis. At the same time, you're talking about Pink. At the same time, you're talking about Jay-Z. And they're all equal. They're all awesome. They're all amazing. And you're engaging students in conversations about all these things, like at a high level. And I mean, whether it's kindergarten or whatever, it's just not putting one in front of the other. It's recognizing the amazingness of each one of them as an individual entity and celebrating it for what it is and not what it's not, and not comparing and contrasting so much. I mean, yeah, comparing, but like, why is it different? But not like this one is better than this one, and this one is fancier than this one. It's like, they're just different. And I think
it's about like talking about how different cultures communicate the human experience through music.
Exactly. Right? You hit the nail on the head completely, 100%. It's like engaging the mariachi band, engaging the folk music from wherever. It's understanding the history behind the ukulele, and not that it's just this cute little instrument. It's like talking about these things and like engaging the students and in like, it's not us and then the world. It's like the world, and we are part of the world, and we all belong in it, and we all have value. It's valuing everything like more on an equitable plane.
I'm gonna say, it sounds like it's just like equity. And I mean, I think it's because it's been shut out for so long and that hasn't been a thing, people have missed out on so much. But I mean, pick up Nina Simone and listen to the way that Nina Simone plays piano, and then go and listen to a classical pianist, and they're equal. I mean, when you listen to Nina turn a fugue out of a jazz standard, and she's improvising it live, it's unreal. But yet she was shut out of so many music rooms forever, so we could only talk about people who play Beethoven sonatas.
Right. And it's that kind of thing too. It's not using popular music or some other thing as a means into the other music. it's valuing them as they are, right? So like, and I mean, I think we've all done this. Like I've done it too. Like I remember I was working in the Bronx probably like 15 years ago, and it was, I mean, I didn't know any of this, and and I played Alicia Keys, and she plays the Moonlight Sonata at the beginning of like one of her like tunes, right? And I was trying to show them that like this music that like they're kind of not familiar with is something that they've actually heard before, right? But that kind of thing is actually colonizing, because I'm saying like, yeah, but she got it from this guy. He's better than she is, instead of saying, hey, she must have listened to him. That's really cool. Let's go check out what he did. And like, let's talk about this. And like, why do you think she used that, like in this piece of music? And like, where is the connection? Allowing the students to make those instead of saying, oh, it came from this. And that implies a hierarchy of that kind of stuff. So it's tricky. I mean, there's a fair amount of research on it if anybody is like really interested. And if you Google decolonizing the music, there's like articles, there's stuff, there's a lot out there these days. So
does that include like festival music? Because I know like when I went through band and choral music and stuff like that, like, it's pretty, this is what would be acceptable to take to festival. So are we seeing that change?
That would be awesome. I don't know if it's changing yet. But that's part of the colonization of the music, right? We're trying to break those things down and change those parameters and change, like what you're talking about, Mike, is like even audition requirements for students, right? Like, do they have to know X? Do they have to know Y? Why do they need to know that? Like, what about if their situation didn't allow them to know that, but they really want to do it? Like, I mean, when I was the director of Contemporary Voice at the University of Miami, like the students in contemporary, you didn't have to like know how to read music. You didn't have to, that wasn't a prerequisite to get in. You had to show like interest and promise and like willingness and like some kind of aptitude in music. But, we would have people that would come in who knew a DAW, digital audio workstation, like Logic or Pro Tools, like super, super well. And they could read piano roll. They could tell you where all this stuff is, but they couldn't read traditional notation. Does that mean they're not a valid musician? No. It just, they think differently, right? So it's like, it's trying to think about like, how can we be more inclusive of the students that are in our classroom? Like, what do they listen to? What do they like? Can we learn something from that? And then changing all these things, like you said, like the festival requirements, like, okay, you could choose this. I mean, I understand why they're there is because they're trying to help people like learn, things that are difficult or harder, but like, couldn't those be from different aspects, right? Like one from jazz, one from pop, you could have different choices and still have them be graded in terms of difficulty level, right? That's the idea behind those, if I remember, is like the difficulty level of the piece, right? But like, could you bring a turntable in or like like what's level 1 on that? What's level 2 on this? What's level 3? Like, what does that mean? Like, where are your production skills? Can you hear, a difference of like 2 dB in a sound? Like, are you able to do that? Like, that's a skill. And it takes practice to be able to hear those slight shifts. And, it's easy to hear like 1 to 100 dB, like that's easy, but 1 dB, like, can you hear the difference in that and make that choice? Because it makes a difference.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. And like you said, I mean, this is way past due. We're not even close to like you said, it's now, I think people are finally looking and going, oh, well, maybe we should listen to this and look into this. But I mean, this is what's always fascinating to me is what you're saying about how, we had popular music programs over in Australia and UK that are based off of rock and roll, which was invented in the United States.
Yeah.
So here we are as the country that invented the thing, and other countries are teaching it, and we're not.
And they do have, like, Mike, what you're talking about, they do have these kinds of things. Like, they have specific gradated, like, tests that you can take and that you kind of have to take in order to get into some of these programs because their financial system is different, right? So they have these. I mean, I can send them to you afterwards or put them somewhere in a chat, but, like, they are, like, you know, you have to be able to do this and this kind of harmony, and you have to be able to sing these kinds of scales. And here's a piece that you need to be able to sing at this level. Like they have them, they're not here, but in other, like they are part of their music education system.
Sure. Well, specifically, I'm talking like imagine the high school student. You know, it's like pick a song from the 24 Italian songs, which I know and I love and I adore. After having the book, you're an artist and you have some talent, you're going to probably grow to appreciate and love that for what it is.
Right.
But it's not a popular music song. It's not like, hey, here's Dave Matthews, pick up a guitar, and now you're going to go perform that. So it's just, where are we in that shift? And is that something that's like talked about at the conference you're speaking about? Or is this just like a very high echelon, there's only a few people that really are speaking about that?
It's talked about there. It's starting to get talked about at NAFME, the National Association for Music Education. It's starting to get talked about in other circles too here. I mean, it's really cool because there's so much research on this, and like there's such a wide, like outside of the US, like there's a lot of research on like best practices, and they've developed all sorts of rubrics and ways to go about learning this stuff. And so we can take advantage of that here and like use some of that too. And I think you're seeing that. I mean, you have Little Kids Rock that's bringing programs in schools. You had something called Amp Up, which was in New York. You have different orgs. You have Guitars Over Guns that's going into after school programs and helping students like have some skills in something and, getting them off the streets and doing, really creative things. So they're all coming. I just think like it's a while, like education changes like this take a while, because if you think about the way that it's structured right now, you have what are called in-service music teachers who are working in the schools themselves, who probably didn't have any access to popular music pedagogies in school when they were going through their training because their professors didn't know any of them, right? So you're starting to see them come into higher education, and you're starting to see those professors start to teach more what they call modern band, and that's another word for popular music. It's like modern band. That's the term that Little Kids Rock uses. Again, like nobody can decide. And I think that's cool. Like, let's not decide, because popular music doesn't really have a definition. So like, let's leave it and you kind of choose which one you like best. But like those things they are coming, but it's going to take a while because people have to break down barriers. They have to learn new skills. It's actually really hard to sing a Dave Matthews song. There's a lot of nuance in the things that go on in the voice, especially for those kinds of things, right? Or like, and it's not the same as singing a 24 Italian. It's totally different.
Sure.
Like,
I mean, we've talked about acoustic training versus amplified training. There's totally different
crazy.
techniques. But I'm just bringing up like, okay, so where is that change? And that's good to hear that. It's not there,
but it's coming.
Maybe starting.
Yeah. Everybody refers to or a lot of music education people refer to the Tanglewood Symposium, which was like in the 40s. And like, that was the first one that said popular music should be part of the music education curriculum. So, it's
You're just 1940s.
Was that 80 years ago? It's 2020 and we're catching up to 1940s. What's basically we're saying. Yeah. Okay. And I mean, I think like one of the big problems with it is that in order to teach in higher ed, you have to have a doctorate, and there are no doctorates. There haven't been. There are now, but there haven't been doctors for people who don't do classical music. And I mean, I know Kat had to create her own path. I had to create my own path. And then once I got mine done, I pushed and pushed until Shenandoah converted its doctorate of ped to be open to everything. So we're the first doctorate in voice pedagogy in the United States that you do not have to audition with any classical music to get it.
Why didn't you do that like 6 years ago? I totally would have come, because like I was looking and I looked and I was like, I can't get in. I don't sing arias. I don't sing any classical music. I haven't done that since I'm 40s, and like I haven't done that since I was 18 for like a semester.
Oh, like changes, like you said, change is slow. But my hope is if we can start turning out people with these degrees, then we can start seeing everything shift. Because unfortunately, in higher ed, your hands are tied by accrediting agencies, and the accrediting agencies say you have to have a doctorate. Yep. So it's like it's really tough, but it's got to change.
It does. And I think you like the pedagogy or the teaching aspect or the production aspect, like those are the way to go in the higher ed, like higher level kinds of things, because you don't really need a performance degree at that level necessarily, because like ideally you should have like your performance level should be at that level. You're looking to go into helping other people learn how to do something. And I mean, that's why I went to the University of Miami to get my doctorate. I got a PhD in music education because there wasn't anywhere to go to do what I did and to learn how to, do it. And so they were really awesome. And I was the TA for the contemporary program for the 3 years that I was there. So I had all contemporary voice students as part of my TA. I had like 3 or 4 classes that I taught, like, or helped out with when I was there, in addition to my studies and stuff. And that gave me, it was awesome, but that was the place. That's why I chose to go there, is because I had access to the thing that I really wanted to work in. And they were willing to work with me on that. And, and it was really fun because I came in with a cohort who were all just traditional music ed. And I was like the weird pop girl, who I don't have any degrees in music ed, like 0, except for my doctorate. I have 2 performance degrees in jazz. And so like I was the weird girl. But like throughout the time, like it was really fun because we all started to learn more about popular music, and like they got engaged with things that I was doing. And so now they're all in it too. And like, it's just funny. So the way like you can see things shift even while you're in it. So it is changing. It's just, people got to be willing to weed whack, as I call it, and just like knock down those walls and just keep going, and don't say, well, I can't do it because of X. It's like, well, just do it. Like, and weed whack your way through it, and like somebody else will follow and they'll thank you, so.
Well, that's what I said at one meeting. I mean, when the questions were like, how are we going to do this? I said, we're going to start doing it.
Yeah.
And we'll figure it out.
And you just,
the first music degree figured it out while it was going on. They didn't have a model. So,
and you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but that's part of it. Like, that's part of the whole popular music model too, is like learn by doing, it's like.
So, I mean, one of the things that, does come up in these conversations are what are the career possibilities? When we're talking about is that, we're going to talk in a minute about, what the higher ed options are, non-higher ed options. But, people want to know, so like, can you actually make a living doing something in there? And I don't think people realize all the options that are available. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like any other musician these days. Like you aren't doing one thing. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, which is what I'm doing right now, I mean, I'm working 5 or 6 different things. I don't look at them as like I'm working for 5. I look at them as I'm Cat Reinhert Incorporated, and these are all my clients, and like they're providing, and so I think the way we talk about that is like a portfolio career, right? Of different kinds of things that bring in income that allow you to do all the things that you want to do with all the skills that you have. And so for popular musicians, I mean, there's, songwriter, like you can be you can work in any sort of industry, right, of the popular music. So there's A&R, there's, you've got licensing and copyright stuff, and you've got all of the promotional kinds of things, labels, like promotional companies, like, I mean, Spotify, they hire thousands of people to do curating and like Spotify playlisting and like all these kinds of things. I mean, the industry itself is huge. And so there's all those kinds of like businessy kind of jobs, right? But then being a musician, I mean, songwriter, like if you get hired by a publishing company, like you're a staff writer. Your job is writing songs for other people. And there are students, I have a former student who got hired as a staff writer for, right out of school with the skills that they have. So there's that. You can be a singer-songwriter, you can be an educator. And that brings up, I saw your post, Matt, the other day or today, I think it was, about like, should pedagogy or some sort of like teaching kind of a thing be part of the, oh my God, 100%. Almost every single one of the students that I have seen and graduate in the last 4 or 5 years, most of them are doing some sort of teaching. And a lot of them are like, Kat, what do I do? I'm like, okay. And I've always advocated for those kinds of things. So there's always there's teaching, they're doing a lot of that. And there's also like the cruise ships and the wedding club date bands. And like, I mean, there's a lot of work out there. You have to find it, and you have to kind of find what you're good at and where your niche is. But you can, I think it's just reimagining that it's not just one thing. I don't know any musician that does one thing. I mean, even Taylor Swift doesn't do one thing. Like, she doesn't just perform and sing. Like, she runs, like, she has a fashion company. She's got, you know, she's working and she's endorsing products. She's going to this, she's trying to do that. Like, she's not just doing one thing. It looks different. The pie is different, but she's running a multi-million-dollar business. So, like, and that's what it is. Like, it's a business. And I think there's that balance of, like, where's the creative artist and where's the business? But, like, if you're not going to work at the business, your art isn't going to see the light of day. So it's not like, and Jen Chapin, she's a really amazing songwriter. She's Harry Chapin's daughter, but I got to know her here in New York and we were having conversations. She's like, and I was like, I hate doing all the business stuff. She's like, nobody's going to work harder for you than you. So work, you know, and if you want your stuff out there, like, you got to do the work. And, like, I'm putting out an album it'll be out in February, but the first single is going to be out in October. And, like, the amount of work, the amount of design, the amount of videos, the amount of time that is going into getting all the stuff ready for that, just for the single itself, is like, and yeah, you could hire somebody to do it, but then you're out all that money. So, and I happen to have, like, pretty decent Photoshop skills. So, like, again, like, there's so many things that you can do in the business, and it's a lot.
And it's huge. And, you know, one thing that's always fascinating me are these statistics and this data. And in 2015, the Recording Industry Association of America says that music industry receipts reached $110.7 billion. And yet there's like 12 popular music degree programs in the United States. But on the flip side, there are 400 universities offering vocal performance degrees with 7,000 students, when Opera America says the gross receipts is $1 billion, of which 75% comes from grants and comes from donations, meaning that ticket sales only come in at like 279 million. So we have 7,000 people in traditional classic performance degrees studying for a $1 billion industry, and we have about 12 schools training people for the $110.7 billion industry. It's very lopsided.
It is. And I mean, I would add to your numbers, like, the music business degrees that aren't in popular music stuff. Like, there's a bunch of those too that aren't, like, in these degrees. So that's probably a little bit bigger, but still, yeah, it's unreal. Like, because, like, there's so many things that you can do, like, in the industry, and, like, and you can make it work. I mean, you can get a really amazing job, like, just at a desk and, you know, doing work with music for somebody else. And a lot of people want to do that, you know, like, they want to, like, help other people realize their art, you know, and that is, like, I want those people. Like, I want the help. Thanks. But I think, like, it's always getting reimagined. And I think that's the cool part, is, like, what's next? You know, like, Spotify is, like, whatever, but, like, what's next? Like, how are we, it's like, we're all complaining about how we're not making money from our music. And yeah, we're not. None of us, I'm not going to make probably a single dime off the record that I'm making. That's okay. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I have music and I want to share it with people. Wow. So I think it's like, I'm doing all these other things so that I can make the art. Right. And so I think it's reimagining what these things look like, and not necessarily saying that the art has to pay for it.
But I think it's also important to remember that, I mean, the whole reason we have superstars and stuff is because of Jenny Lind. When she was brought over to the United States, the first famous person to come here was the soprano, famous operatic soprano, Jenny Lind. And then they made a lot of money off of her. So they started bringing in other famous people. But if you go back to Bach was a local church musician, right? Yeah. So this person that's put up on a pedestal upon which we've built the ivory tower of higher ed was a church musician in a local community.
Yeah, Mozart too. Like, he was paid by they were on salary from, like, the king, or they were working for, Michelangelo too. Like, they were all, like, they had patrons and, like, what, but they're still getting paid. Like, it's business.
They were regional artists,
yes,
local artists. And that's one of the things I like to talk a lot about, is, like, let's reimagine success in the arts, because that whole idea of you're only successful if you're famous is bogus. Half the people we admire were not famous when they were alive. or they were only famous in their regional circle or in their national, in their small European country. And so there's so many things that I think have prevented or been used as excuses why not to pursue some of these degrees that they don't hold up.
They don't. And I think you hit something on the head too of like success. It's like, it's really whatever you define it as, because if you define success as a Grammy and you win it, okay, what do you do tomorrow?
Yep.
I'm always asking students that. I'm like, what do you want to do? They're like, I want to win a Grammy. I'm like, okay, so what are you going to do after you win it?
Another Grammy.
Like, stop working? Like, oh, I have to win another one. I'm like, really? Like, what if you don't? Is your life over at 25?
Gosh,
like, really?
Got another 45 years left to work.
Right. I'm like, what about if that's just one thing? Like maybe your definitions of success need to be different. Like maybe it's, I want to create music my whole life. Can you fail at that? No. And whatever happens from that, really awesome. I mean, my husband's a jazz bass player, and we were talking about my record, and I was like, blah, blah, blah. He's like, yeah, what number is this? I was like, 5. He's like, oh, you got 5 more to go before you can like really start making art. He's like, you got to get the first 10 out first, and like get them over with, because they're going to be crap. So,
it's true.
I think that idea that you're just going to keep making and keep building and keep growing as an artist, like that's success. I want that. I want to keep like meeting cool people and being like, hey, do you want to do this? I'm like, yeah, that sounds fun, and I don't know where this is going to go. Maybe this will go somewhere else, and maybe that goes somewhere else. And like, but that's a cool journey to be on. That's a full life whenever it's not here anymore. Yep. So,
hey guys, we have a lot of comments in. So I just want to say, Jeff, thanks for joining. Denise, good to have you. Amanda, Matt, I don't know if you saw any of these, but
yeah. I see a couple of them popping up on my end. Yeah, there's lots of highs.
Hey, Jeff.
Denise popping in. So tell me this. So let's say that somebody, we have teachers tuning in, obviously, and then singers that tune in. And if any of them are thinking like, this does sound of interest to me, what are those options? We're saying you can do this in college music ed programs, but what are some of the programs? What are they teaching?
Well, I mean, the top 5 here in the U.S., they also happen to be the most expensive, but the ones that like are University of Southern California, Thornton School of Music, they have a pop music program. The University of Miami, Frost School of Music has a contemporary, that's what they call it. You've got Belmont University, which has, it's kind of like their songwriting is in the business school and their contemporary vocal is in another school that I can't remember, and they don't really cross each other. So that's an interesting dynamic there. But you can go there and get all those things. Then you've got Clive Davis in New York. And you also have Steinhardt in New York, which is doing a contemporary vocal degree, which is not connected to the Clive Davis Institute, which is doing like more production kind of things, but in songwriting. And then the one at Steinhardt, from what I understand, is also doing songwriting. Like NYU is like, I don't quite understand, but they're doing it. And then you also have CU Denver, which has a contemporary popular program, and Berkeley. And so, but the price tag is high. Like most of them are around the $60K mark, and USC
total or per year?
Per year. Okay. Like around there, most of them.
So like a Porsche a year.
Yeah, it's a lot. And USC, at least, and I haven't checked in a couple of years, but when I did my research for my dissertation, where I dug into USC and UM, and anybody who wants to read it, it's free on my website. If you go to katreinert.com/research, like it's free. You can download the whole entire 250 pages and read all about this. And there's lots of information. But they don't offer any merit-based scholarships. So it's only like if you get a scholarship to USC itself, like as the school, academic scholarship, but none. UM does offer some merit-based scholarships. Belmont has some, Berkeley also, and CU Denver has some too. But I mean, it's still like, even if it's $40K, it's still a lot of money to go to school, right? And how are you going to get that back on the other side? That's going to take a while. Unless even working as an entrepreneur. Oh yeah, and Loyola, thanks. But it's a kind of up and coming program, I believe, Amanda. But it's been around, but it's not making as much noise as some of these other ones are, which is what I'm talking about. There are others, and Jessica Baldwin on a site called Singing and Popular Musics has a list of all of the schools that offer some sort of vocal component and degree in popular music or contemporary or commercial. So that is a place where you can go, but those are kind of the big ones here. You've got in the UK, there's Royal Northern, and there's one at Edinburgh Napier. I know in Australia, there's one at Griffith, and there's another one at, I'm totally spacing, Monash University. There's one there. I mean, you got to do a little digging, but they do exist, and they all offer different kinds of things. As I think
some of those European degrees are actually cheaper than American degrees.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking, I can't go to Europe, you might be surprised. Compared to 60,000, you actually could go to Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. For some of these, some singers, it is a price issue. I mean, that's how, when I grew up as a high school kid, it would have been completely out of my league. And then you have other people who may not get into some of those schools. But from my understanding, that's not the only way. Yeah, you may not go to college, but there's plenty of other pathways. So what are the other ways that people could get into this industry?
Well, I mean, work on your skills. I think that's the biggest one, is like figure out a way to learn. And these days, I mean, you've got YouTube channels. If you want to learn how to work in a DAW, I mean, just go on YouTube and like you can really learn how to work in almost any kind of program that you want to and get really good at it and practice just like anything else. Like get good and then start making stuff and putting it out and thinking about it like a business. Like if you're going to build a business from the bottom up, how do you do that? Like, how do you get the word out about your business? How do you collaborate? How do you find other people to make music with? Where do you go? Another thing is like location, and how can you network with people around you? Like going out, when we can do that again. But, if you live in Nashville, or you live in New York, or you live in LA, or you live in Chicago, or wherever, even if you live in a small town, like start there, like start going out, find the local musicians, find the local bars and start playing with them, start showing up and doing your thing and like learning tunes and talking to the people and like build your skills and build your network. And those people probably came from somewhere else. So talk to them and say, well, what do you do? Like, I'd like to go to Nashville, and let's say you're in Kentucky. And they're like, oh man, I know this person, I'll tell you about them. And they hook you up and you go there and you network. It's not, I think networking gets a bad rap as like gross, but it's really just about community. Like you're building your community of people, right? Like Mike is now I met him this evening and now he's part of my community again, right? I'm going to like be like, yo, you want to come to APME and talk about this? It's cool, or like that's so important. It's like build your community. And I had a student ask me like, how do I get involved with like singing backups and doing that kind of, I was like, well, who do you know? She's like, nobody. I was like, really? You went to Berkeley. Don't you have any friends that sing stuff? She's like, yeah. I was like, well, that's who you know, right? Start there. Right. And you start singing on their stuff. Tell them you're available. Tell them that like you can do that. And and they have a song and it gets into the hands of this person. That person goes, yo, who sang background vocals on that? And you're like, oh, this girl in New York, she's great. Here's her number. And next thing you're singing on this. And then that person says, oh, like literally that's the way it happens. And everybody's like, oh, that's magic. I'm like, no, it's called community. Like you did a good job. They want to hire you. Like they want to work with people that are good. Like nobody, like in this world, you don't have to work with anybody that's not good. So don't, put yourself out there. I think like you don't have to go to college, or take a course or find a local expert and save up some money and study with them for a year. Like if you're in Shenandoah, study with Matt, like he'll give you private lessons and you can just, or me, I'm in New York, or find someone else. It's like, tell your students like these people are out there, they'll give you your time, and they often like work. It's like, okay, like that's cool. I think there's a lot of ways to learn. It's just about learning, being good at your skill. Like there's a book called So Good They Can't Ignore You. Like be so good they can't ignore you. Okay. It's by Cal Newport. Great book. made me really angry at the beginning, but it's really good. But that's the idea, is like, be so good that you can't be ignored anymore. Like, people have to pay attention to you just because you're making noise, and it's good.
That's a great point. I mean, one of the things that I've mentioned before, or recommended to people, I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, but it's like at least getting a college degree, because even on a lot of these entry-level jobs, they'll want you to have a bachelor's in something, and marketing is a great pathway, or accounting, or business management, and then go to one of these major cities and go to a school in Nashville, go to a school in Chicago, and and get that degree. But at least then you are in that community that's a bigger community, then you're networking in that scene, and then you have a built-in audience.
Totally. And if you did something like that, if you got a degree in music business or music marketing, or like those musicians want to talk to you, you get to make the connections in a different way, right? Then you're helping them, they're going to help you out. Like, you don't have to have like a fancy thing in order, like people are lucky if they can do that, but it's not the only way to get into this, like you could get anything you wanted, like go to your community college and get a 2-year degree and transfer and like have that, count towards something. And like, a college degree will open doors. It will get you in doors that you can't open without it. And you don't know, later in life, you might want to go back to school or have the funds to be able to do it. And so it's way easier to do a master's degree if you're 30 than it is to do an undergraduate degree, because there are often people in classes. But like get a law degree, get a music business degree. There's a lot of places to get music business degrees, and they don't cost $60,000 a year.
The last time, if you're really science heavy, get an anesthesiology degree. I saw what those anesthesiologists make. You can work like 2 years and be done. And then do music all you want. Take your $1 million from your 2 years of being on the job.
Totally.
Right. Jan popped in and made a good comment here. He said, when artists in popular music are living lives that aren't something that meets social norms, then the music they produce is not held in esteem. And even Mozart had this issue. And that's a good point. There's a lot of, it's the social world and views of the world have probably had a lot of big hand in silencing a lot of art, unfortunately. But I think the good thing is the internet's kind of blown that apart. I mean, I think we're also seeing a lot of the explosion of popular music now that record labels don't control everything.
Yeah.
And, so all of a sudden anybody can put their music online, and
you just need a bedroom, a microphone, and a DAW, and you're got a Grammy.
Much different world. So, I reached out to you because I had this question I wanted to pick your brain about, but since this is your area of major research in the dissertation, I put the link in the comments section in case you want to be able to check it out. But, what does it take to build a music degree? Is there a one way only to do this? Are there multiple paths?
I mean, I think you brought it up before, which is just do it. Like, make it work with what you have, right? I think Ray Sanchez, who's at and is a huge mentor of mine, his mantra was always like, make it work. Like, what can you do with what you have? Not what do you need to make something work, but what can you do with what you have? Like, what do you already have? You probably have, most schools have some kind of jazz thing, and that jazz musician probably has played pop gigs and knows, enough to be dangerous, as I say, but like, they could direct people. They probably know other musicians that work more in popular musician land than they do, right? What other classes do you have? Do you have classes in music tech? A lot of schools do have classes, even just beginning classes in music tech. Do you have, music business classes at the school? Are there, those things often exist even if a popular music program doesn't, right? So what do you have? Like, take a look at what you have, and then you go, okay, so what do we have? What can we build with that? And who do we have, right? That's part of, and who's around. I think one of the things I talk about in my dissertation is that, like, using the community, again, going back to community that's around you, right? If you're in, I don't know, if you're in New York, it can look like everything, right? But if maybe you're in Missouri and there's a huge like bluegrass contingent or something, use those musicians. That's where those people are, right? That's your experts in the popular music field. And maybe your degree looks more bluegrass then the next person. It's still got like the songwriting and the music business and the music theory and, music theory that makes sense for these musicians. This isn't like, figure eight bass. Like, who cares? I can't read that. I have a PhD in music. Like, I don't care. Like, when do I ever use that? It's not necessary. Okay. Like, what do they need? What do they need to know? What's important? And if they want to take figure eight, awesome stuff like that, then they can do that in your junior or senior years, like, an elective. I think that's the other part. And we talked about this, is like, give students options. These kinds of students like options. They like to make their own choices and they like to be autonomous in their learning. They want to have agency over the things that they're doing, and they want help, but they want to make the choices as to what they need. And at the beginning, I think Chris Sampson talks about like how you kind of hold their hand a lot at the beginning and then you sort of like slowly let go as they get up into the school. So at freshman year, yeah, maybe it's all prescribed because they don't know. They're trying to just figure out like how to be. They're like, oh my God, how do I not let my dog, my cat, my mom, my food, like what is this thing, right? And I got a roommate and they're stressed out about everything that has nothing to do with what you're trying to teach them. They can't figure out like what they want, and some of them will, but that's okay. And then the next year, give them more options, and the third year, more options, and the fourth year that they're there, like a lot of options, like, here, choose from these electives. You have to have enough to fill up this many credits, but like, what do you want to learn at that point? Like, what's going to help? What do you think is going to help you be the musician that you want to be and have the career that you want to have once you graduate? So I think it's about looking at what you have, building on that to kind of complete the thing, based on the community and the people you have around you. You don't need to fly in, musicians from fancy places. Like, you've got music. They're everywhere, and they're probably hungry for work, and they're probably really good. Build it around that. And then, and I think too, like, take the temperature of the school. What are they ready for? Songwriting degrees are often, or songwriting kind of based things can be, I think, a little easier sell for a lot of schools because there's so much history in songwriting, right? You've got like the Tin Pan Alley, you've got the blues, you've got this whole history of songwriting that runs through like folk and pop music, and like, and it's a craft, it's a skill, and like, it is obvious to sell it like that, and there's tons of research to back it up. It's an easier sell often than like a performance degree in some kind of music. That can scare people sometimes, I think, especially entrenched faculty that are worried about, oh, if we bring this in, it's going to like lower our like level. I'm like, no, like, these people are going to ask good questions. They're going to challenge you. They're going to wonder why are we learning this? And that's a good question. I love when kids are like, why do you want us to do this? And I'm like, I'm so glad you asked. Here's why, and if you can't answer that question, then say, you know what? I don't know. Don't do that until I figure it out. Like, I think we as professors and teachers have to be able to say, like, maybe what I learned and the way I learned it isn't the right way to do it. Maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's a different approach. Maybe this doesn't make any sense. Did I think about that? I don't know. Maybe I didn't. So I think it takes a lot. It takes a village. It takes people, but ultimately it takes imagination and creativity and a willingness to kind of try something and maybe it doesn't go as well as you think it does right away.
I think take a village is what's key is, we're moving away. I think in a lot of the traditional classical fields, you went to study with one teacher there, and that was like your own mentor.
Yeah.
But, I'm part of the leadership team for our musical theater degree, and it's a leadership team. We have a head of the program, but there's 4 of us always in the room working together to figure out exactly what we're doing. And we need every team member, every faculty member to be good, because if they're not, I have a weak program.
Yeah.
And, and it's, it really does. If you have a village guiding these students, your students are going to be way more successful than if you try to go it alone, because we now live in a world where there's a lot of subspecialties and everything else, and you literally can't know it all. There's too much information coming out all the time. You can't keep up with it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't try. I'm like, this is what I do. Like, if you want someone who does Mozart and Verdi, like, here's my friend's number. Like, she's amazing at it. Like, that's not me,
Well, when in doubt, refer out. That's what I always say.
100%. And don't be embarrassed. I mean, it's like, okay, I don't know that. That's okay. Like, you don't know this.
I mean, I was an opera singer, working for a good decade. I don't teach it because I'm so far removed at this point that it's just, I'm not your person. My colleagues are much better at that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's no shame. It's just, like you said, do what you do. Focus on that. We need
And do it well.
Yeah. So last question for you this evening. This has been an awesome chat. But just from your research and you looking around at the world around you, where do you think we're going 10 years from now? I mean, I think
in education,
air. I don't know. In education, in performance. I'm always just curious what to see, the fortune tellers, the future seers. Where are we going?
Is the vaccine coming in 2021?
Fingers crossed, because I want to go out and sing.
Right.
I mean, I think I'm going to pull a little bit from Chris Sampson, who was at USC, and he's been a mentor and friend. And but one of the things he talked about was that we have contemporary musicians, and that's just anybody who's making music now, and that there's and I love his idea of just, and I think maybe we can think about this as like, maybe it isn't classical, jazz, musical theater, pop music, folk, rap, whatever. It's like contemporary music. It's like you've got your classical violinist sitting with the singer-songwriter who plays guitar, sitting with the bluegrass banjo player, sitting with, the conga player. And they've put a group together and they're going out, and it's this totally new original thing. And you're starting to see that. You see that a lot in pop music, where these cross genre is what they kind of call them, because the music industry wants boxes. And I feel like perhaps maybe if we can kind of think about this and problematize it and help people think about it this way, is like, maybe the boxes aren't there. Maybe it's just like, I'm going to go see the Matt Edwards band. And people are like, well, what's that? And it's like, well, it's kind of like mariachi meets bluegrass meets classical opera. And they're like, dude, that sounds amazing. I want to go
there. I want to hear it.
Like,
screaming in the background.
What is that? Exactly. What is that? I want that. Like maybe we can get to the point where it's not one thing or the other. It's like whatever that thing is the thing we're going to go see, and can we help as educators? Can we help people think about this? And like, can we, and Chris Sampson talks about this, is like, can we change the industry from the inside? Like, can we put people in that are thinking like this into these places and like breaking down, as Jennifer says, like breaking down all these barriers and just like eroding like the boxes and saying like, hey, this music is awesome. You should check it out. This is what it is, and yeah, it's a little of this, but it's not any one thing, and I don't know, like, I think that would be amazing. And maybe it's coming, because that would be decolonizing the music industry. I'm just like, I don't know. We're going to a concert. What is it? Well, it's music. It's going to be awesome. And it is, right? It's like music is there to make us feel things, to make us be aware of our surroundings, to comment on what's happening socially. I think there's definitely like a huge thing that's going to come out of what we're going through right now, of like, not protest songs, but like artistic citizenship, like being aware of what's going on and like talking about it and singing about it or writing about it and playing about it. And who knows? But yeah, that would be my hope. It's just kind of like,
I like that vision a lot. I think that's a pretty special vision, and it could be really cool. I mean, I agree. I'm always looking for stuff that's new and different and out there. And yeah, I mean, you can only go so long doing the same, 3-chord patterns and, songs about the same topics. So to mix in the bluegrass, operas, baritone, and what was the other, mariachi? I like that. Tell my wife
I'm just punting. It's like,
hey,
I don't know. That sounds funny.
Tell my wife, I'm telling Jackie, I'm quitting my job. I'm starting a mariachi bluegrass opera band. And if you got a problem with it, reach out to Kat.
It'll be amazing.
I love it. Well, hey, it's just been an absolute pleasure to have you here.
It's so fun.
Just full of wonderful information to share. If you haven't checked out Kat's website yet, go on over, check it out. You can, look up her music online. She's a great singer and player. And, check out her work. Check out the APME.
Please come. We'd love to have you.
Come. We need more people there. And the more
And
that
the deadline is, you said November 1st to
First.
submit? Okay,
Yeah.
great. Okay.
Yeah. So, all right, everybody, Jennifer, Jan, Amanda, lots of other people popping in. Jeff, thank you for stopping by. Alice, Edry, hey. It's been great having you by, seeing your comments coming in the comments stream. And this will be available for people to watch up on the voicelessons.com Facebook page. So if you think somebody needs to watch this and they weren't able to catch it tonight, just guide them on over to our page. It'll be up there for at least the next month. So, Kat, thanks a lot for being here. Mike,
Thank
good to see
you.
you again.
It was good to
This
meet
was
you.
so awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. And
Yeah.
Welcome.
yeah.
And everyone else, we will see you next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the voicelessons.com Thursday Night Live. Good night. Have a great weekend.
Hey, guys.
Good
Have a good
night.
week.